The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of Wilson, Kansas, throwing up a cloud of dust that settled on everything it touched, including Clara Owens, who stepped down onto the wooden boardwalk with nothing but a carpet bag and the dress on her back that looked like it had survived a war and lost. She had traveled 300 miles from St. Louis in the summer of 1879, following the promise of work at the general store, and now she stood in the blazing August heat, wondering if she had made the right choice, leaving behind the only home she had ever known. The dress had been her mother's once, back when the fabric was whole and the color was a vibrant green instead of this faded gray-green that barely held together at the seams. Clara could feel the thread giving way along her left shoulder as she lifted her bag, and she quickly adjusted the shawl she wore to cover the worst of the damage. She was 22 years old and had exactly $3 to her name, which would need to last until her first wages came through at the end of the month. Wilson was smaller than she had imagined, just one main street with a handful of buildings that looked like they were holding each other up against the prairie wind. The general store stood on the corner, its painted sign promising goods and sundries, and next to it was a saloon that already had men filtering in and out despite the early afternoon hour. Across the street was a blacksmith shop where the ring of hammer on anvil created a steady rhythm, and beyond that she could see a livery stable and what looked like a boarding house. Clara walked toward the general store, conscious of every step she took in her worn boots that pinched at her toes. She had written ahead to Mr. Peterson, who owned the establishment, and he had written back saying he needed help with inventory and serving customers now that his wife had passed, and his daughter had married and moved to Topeka. The job came with a small room above the store and meals, which was more than Clara had in St. Louis, where she had been living in a boarding house and working at a laundry for pennies. The bell above the door chimed when she entered, and the cool dimness of the interior was a relief after the brutal sunshine. Shelves lined every wall, packed with everything from canned goods to bolts of fabric, from farming tools to patent medicines. The smell of coffee and tobacco and leather filled the air, and Clara breathed it in, feeling something settle in her chest that might have been hope. "You must be Miss Owens," came a voice from behind the counter, and an elderly man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a kind face emerged from the back room. "I am George Peterson. Welcome to Wilson." "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Peterson," Clara said, setting down her bag and offering her hand. His grip was firm despite his age, and his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. "Let me show you where you will be staying, and then we can discuss your duties," he said, leading her toward a narrow staircase at the back of the store. "It is not much, but it is clean and private." The room was indeed small, barely large enough for the narrow bed, washstand, and trunk that occupied it, but it had a window that looked out over the main street and let in the afternoon light. Clara set her carpet bag on the bed and turned to Mr. Peterson with a genuine smile. "It is perfect," she said, and she meant it. This was hers, a space where no one would bother her or demand rent she could not afford. "Good, good," Mr. Peterson said, adjusting his spectacles. "We open at 7 in the morning and close at 6 in the evening, except on Sundays when we are closed all day. You will help with customers, keep the shelves stocked, and handle the accounts ledger. I will pay you $10 a month plus room and board. Does that suit you?" It was more than she had been making at the laundry, and Clara nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. When would you like me to start?" "Tomorrow morning will be soon enough. Get yourself settled today, and there is a dining room downstairs where you can take your meals with me. My cooking is not fancy, but it fills the belly." He paused, his gaze taking in her appearance with a careful neutrality that made Clara acutely aware of her shabby dress and worn boots. "If you need anything, you just let me know." After he left, Clara unpacked her few belongings, hanging the one spare dress she owned on a peg by the door. It was in only slightly better condition than the one she wore, with patches at the elbows and a hem that had been let down and taken up so many times it looked like a topographical map. She had one nightgown, 2 sets of undergarments, a hairbrush that had been her grandmother's, and a small leather-bound book of poetry that was the only luxury she allowed herself. She poured water from the pitcher into the basin and washed the dust from her face and hands, then sat on the edge of the bed and allowed herself a moment to simply breathe. She had done it. She had left St. Louis and made it to Kansas and secured a position that would allow her to live independently. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That evening she ate dinner with Mr. Peterson in the small kitchen behind the store, a simple meal of beans and cornbread that tasted better than anything she had eaten in weeks. He told her about Wilson, how it had been founded 10 years earlier and had grown slowly but steadily as more families moved west to claim homesteads. He told her about the customers she would meet, the ranchers and farmers and their wives who came to town once a week or once a month to stock up on supplies. He told her about the railroad that was supposed to come through in the next few years, which would change everything. Clara listened and asked questions, and tried not to think about how the thread at her shoulder had finally given way completely during dinner, leaving a gap that showed her chemise underneath. She kept her shawl pulled tight and hoped Mr. Peterson would not notice. The next morning, she woke before dawn, washed and dressed and braided her dark hair into a coronet around her head. She looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand and saw a thin young woman with gray eyes and a determined set to her jaw. The dress looked even worse in the morning light, the fabric so worn in places that it was nearly transparent. She pulled on her shawl and went downstairs to begin her first day of work. The morning passed in a blur of learning, where everything was kept and how Mr. Peterson liked things organized. Customers came in steadily, farmers mostly, buying seed and nails and coffee. Clara learned to measure out flour and sugar from the big barrels, to cut fabric from the bolts with the large shears, to make change quickly and accurately. By noon her feet ached and her back hurt, but she felt a satisfaction she had never experienced at the laundry. She was restocking the shelves near the front window when the bell above the door chimed, and a man walked in who made her forget what she was doing entirely. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and a lean build that spoke of hard physical work. He wore dusty range clothes and a hat pulled low over his face, but when he removed it, she saw dark hair and a face that was all sharp angles and sun-weathered skin. His eyes were an unusual shade of blue-gray, like storm clouds over the prairie. "Afternoon, Isaac," Mr. Peterson called from behind the counter. "What brings you to town today?" "Need some tobacco and ammunition," the man said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to vibrate in Clara's chest. "And I heard you hired some help." "Indeed I did," Mr. Peterson said, with obvious pride. "Miss Owens, come and meet Isaac Lawson. He has a ranch about 15 miles north of here." Clara set down the cans she was holding and walked over, very conscious of her shabby appearance next to this man, who, despite the dust on his clothes, had an air of capability and strength about him. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Lawson." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Clara felt heat rise to her cheeks under his scrutiny. His gaze traveled from her face down to her dress, and she saw something flicker in his eyes that might have been concern or pity, or both. She lifted her chin slightly, refusing to be ashamed of circumstances beyond her control. "Miss Owens," he said, inclining his head. "Welcome to Wilson. I hope you will like it here." "I am sure I will," Clara said, keeping her voice steady. "What kind of tobacco would you like?" She helped him gather his supplies, measuring out the tobacco and counting ammunition while he spoke with Mr. Peterson about cattle prices and weather patterns. She was aware of him watching her as she worked, though he was subtle about it, and when she handed him his parcels, their fingers brushed briefly. The contact sent a shock through her system that she did not understand. "Thank you, Miss Owens," Isaac said, paying for his purchases. "I am sure I will see you again soon." After he left, Clara stood by the counter feeling strangely unsettled. Mr. Peterson chuckled softly. "Isaac is a good man. Came out here 5 years ago with nothing but a horse and a dream. Built his ranch up from scratch, runs about 500 head of cattle now. Keeps to himself mostly, but he is honest and hardworking." "I am sure he is," Clara said, turning back to her work and trying not to think about blue-gray eyes and a voice like distant thunder. The days fell into a pattern. Clara woke early, worked in the store from morning until evening, ate dinner with Mr. Peterson, and fell into bed exhausted but content. She learned the rhythm of the town, who came in on which days, who paid cash and who wanted credit, who gossiped and who kept to themselves. She learned to navigate the social dynamics, to be friendly but not too familiar, to deflect unwanted attention from cowboys who came in from the ranches with too much time and money on their hands. And every week, like clockwork, Isaac Lawson came to town for supplies. He always came on Thursdays, arriving mid-morning when the store was usually quiet. He would remove his hat, nod to Mr. Peterson, and then spend time gathering what he needed while making quiet conversation. Clara found herself looking forward to those visits more than she wanted to admit, found herself paying extra attention to her appearance on Thursday mornings, even though there was little she could do about her increasingly deteriorating dress. Because it was getting worse. The seam along her shoulder had opened completely, requiring her to sew it shut every few days with thread that did not quite match. The hem was coming apart in places, and there was a tear near the waist that she had patched with a scrap of fabric that was a completely different color. Her shawl covered the worst of it, but she was painfully aware that she looked like a vagabond. She had been in Wilson for 6 weeks when Isaac came in on a Thursday and found her behind the counter, trying to repair the cuff of her sleeve that had split open while she was moving heavy sacks of grain. She had needle and thread and was attempting to make the repair as inconspicuous as possible, but it was a losing battle. "Miss Owens," Isaac said, and she looked up quickly, shoving the needle through the fabric one last time before setting it aside. "Mr. Lawson, what can I help you with today?" She stood, smoothing down her dress automatically, and then regretting it as she felt more threads give way under her palm. "I need some coffee and dried beans," he said, but he was looking at her dress with a frown creasing his forehead. "And maybe some rope." Clara gathered his supplies, measuring out the coffee beans and weighing the dried beans on the scale. Isaac watched her work in silence, and when she handed him the parcels, he did not take them immediately. "Miss Owens," he said slowly, "may I speak plainly with you?" Something in his tone made her nervous, but she nodded. "Of course." "Your dress is falling apart," he said, and the bluntness of the statement made her face flame with embarrassment. "I do not mean to cause offense, but I have noticed it getting worse each week. Do you have another?" Clara wanted to sink through the floorboards. Of all the humiliations she had endured in her life, having this man point out her poverty was perhaps the worst. "I have another dress," she said stiffly, not mentioning that it was in equally poor condition. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Lawson." He shifted his weight, clearly uncomfortable, but determined to continue. "The reason I mention it is because I know Mr. Peterson stocks fabric. Have you considered making yourself something new?" "On my wages, Mr. Lawson. Fabric is a luxury I cannot afford," Clara said, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. "I send most of what I earn back to my sister in St. Louis, who has 3 children and a husband who drinks more than he works. So, yes, my dress is in poor condition, but there is nothing to be done about it at present." She saw something in his eyes then, a softening that made her want to cry or scream or both. "I did not mean to pry into your circumstances," he said quietly. "I apologize." "There is nothing to apologize for," Clara said, though her voice was tight. "Will there be anything else?" He took his parcels and left, and Clara stood behind the counter, fighting back tears of frustration and shame. She knew her dress was a disgrace. She knew she looked like a beggar. But what was she supposed to do about it? That afternoon, Mrs. Henderson came into the store with her 2 daughters, both around Clara's age, and dressed in pretty calico dresses with matching ribbons in their hair. They whispered to each other while their mother shopped, and Clara heard the word ragamuffin float across the store. She kept her head high and her expression neutral, but inside she felt something shrivel. That night she counted her money in the privacy of her room. She had earned 2 months' wages, $20 total, and she had sent 15 of it to her sister Molly, whose last letter had been full of desperation and pleas for help. That left her with $5, which she had been saving for winter boots because her current pair had holes in the soles. She sat on her bed and looked at the coins in her palm and tried to decide if she could spare enough for even the cheapest fabric. The mathematics were not encouraging. The plainest cotton was 10 cents a yard, and she would need at least 8 yards to make a dress. 80 cents just for fabric, plus another 10 cents for thread and buttons. That would leave her with $4.10, not enough for boots. She put the money back in the small tin where she kept it and lay down on the bed, staring at the ceiling and trying not to feel defeated. The next Thursday, Isaac came into the store carrying a large wrapped parcel under his arm. Clara was helping Mrs. Chen select patterns for a quilt and did not see him at first. But when she turned around, he was standing by the counter with an expression on his face that she could not read. "Mr. Lawson," she said, excusing herself from Mrs. Chen. "Your usual supplies?" "Not today," he said, and then he set the parcel on the counter and pushed it toward her. "This is for you." Clara stared at the brown paper wrapping, confused. "I do not understand." "Open it," he said, and something in his voice made her hands move even though her mind was full of questions. She untied the string and pulled back the paper, And then she could not breathe, because inside was fabric, yards and yards of beautiful fabric in a deep blue color that reminded her of cornflowers. Underneath that was more fabric, a practical brown cotton, and underneath that was cream-colored linen. There were also cards of buttons, spools of thread in matching colors, needles, pins, and a pair of good sewing shears. "I cannot accept this," Clara said immediately, even as her fingers itched to touch the blue fabric. "Mr. Lawson, this is far too generous." "You said you could not afford fabric," Isaac said, his voice gruff. "Now you can." "But I cannot pay you back," Clara protested, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "I cannot be in debt to you." "There is no debt," Isaac said firmly. "Consider it a gift, a welcome to Wilson if you like." "Mr. Lawson," Clara said, and now the tears were falling despite her best efforts to stop them. "Why would you do this for me? You barely know me." He looked at her for a long moment, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat. "Because you deserve nice things always," he said quietly. "Not dresses held together with hope and prayer. You work hard, you are kind to everyone who comes through that door, and you deserve better than what you have been given." Clara wiped at her tears with the back of her hand, overwhelmed by the generosity in the words and the way he was looking at her like she mattered. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will make yourself some new dresses," Isaac said, and there was a hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "And maybe say you will save me a dance at the social next month." "There is a social?" Clara asked, sniffing and trying to compose herself. "First Saturday in October," Isaac said. "The whole town turns out for it. Music, dancing, food. It is about the only entertainment we get around here." "Then yes," Clara said, placing her hand on the fabric like a promise. "I will save you a dance, Mr. Lawson. Thank you does not seem adequate, but thank you." "You are welcome, Miss Owens," he said, and then he tipped his hat and left, leaving Clara standing behind the counter with a fortune in fabric and a heart that was beating far too fast. Mr. Peterson came out from the back room, where he had been pretending not to listen. "That Isaac Lawson is a good man," he said, and there was approval in his voice. "A very good man indeed." Clara could only nod, still too overwhelmed to speak. That night she spread the fabric out on her bed and ran her hands over it, marveling at the quality and the colors. The blue was so beautiful it made her chest ache. She had never owned anything this fine in her entire life. She took her measurements, calculated the pattern pieces, and began cutting the brown cotton first because it was more practical and she could wear it to work. She sewed in the evenings after the store closed, sitting by the lamp and carefully stitching seams and setting sleeves and attaching buttons. Mr. Peterson let her use his wife's old sewing machine, which made the work go faster, and after 4 days, she had completed the brown dress. She tried it on and looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back. The dress fit properly, the fabric was whole and clean, and she looked respectable. She wore it to work the next day and saw the difference it made immediately. Customers smiled at her more readily. Mrs. Henderson did not whisper to her daughters, and Mr. Peterson beamed with pride. But the person whose reaction she cared about most did not come to the store that day because it was not Thursday. So she waited, and while she waited, she made the blue dress, taking extra care with every stitch because this was the one she would wear to the social. She fashioned it with a fitted bodice and a full skirt, with tiny covered buttons down the front and lace at the collar that she purchased with her own money because she wanted it to be perfect. She made the cream dress as well, simple and practical for everyday wear. And when she was finished, she had 3 dresses that were entirely hers and entirely whole. Thursday came, and Isaac walked into the store and stopped dead when he saw her in the brown dress. His eyes widened and something crossed his face that looked like wonder. "Miss Owens," he said, and his voice was rough. "That dress suits you well." "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," Clara said, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "And thank you again for the fabric. I cannot express what your generosity has meant to me." "Seeing you in a proper dress is thanks enough," Isaac said, and then he seemed to realize how that sounded and cleared his throat. "I mean, you look very nice. The color suits you." They stared at each other for a moment, and Clara felt the air between them become charged with something she did not have a name for. Then Mr. Peterson coughed meaningfully from the back room, and the spell broke. "What can I help you with today?" Clara asked, trying to regain her professional composure. "The usual," Isaac said, but he kept glancing at her as she gathered his supplies, and she caught him smiling to himself more than once. When he paid for his purchases, he lingered at the counter. "The social is 2 weeks from Saturday," he said. "I will look forward to that dance, Miss Owens." "As will I, Mr. Lawson," Clara said, and she meant it with every fiber of her being. The 2 weeks passed both slowly and quickly, time behaving in that strange, contradictory way it does when you are anticipating something wonderful. Clara wore her new dresses in rotation, carefully washing and pressing them so they always looked their best. She noticed men tipping their hats to her on the street, women inviting her to sit with them at church, children smiling at her instead of staring at her poverty. The change in how she was treated was both gratifying and infuriating because she was the same person she had been in the threadbare dress. But now people saw her differently. Isaac continued to come every Thursday, and each visit lasted a little longer than the last. He would ask her about her week, tell her about the ranch, share small details of his life that felt like gifts. She learned that he was 26 years old, that he had come from Ohio originally, that his parents and younger brother had died in a fever outbreak, and he had come west to escape the memories. She learned that he loved the land with a fierce passion, that he woke before dawn every day to watch the sunrise, that he had a horse named Thunder who was as ornery as he was loyal. In turn, she told him about St. Louis, about growing up in a tenement with 4 siblings and parents who worked themselves to death trying to provide for them. She told him about Molly and her struggles, about her other siblings scattered to the winds, about her determination to make something of herself despite the circumstances of her birth. He listened to everything she said with an attention that made her feel seen in a way she never had before. The night before the social, Clara could barely sleep. She had pressed the blue dress one final time, had washed her hair with the good soap she had splurged on, had buffed her boots until they shone as much as worn leather could shine. She lay in bed and tried not to think about what it would feel like to dance with Isaac Lawson, to have his hand at her waist and his eyes on her face. But it was impossible not to imagine it. The social was held in the largest barn in Wilson, which belonged to a farmer named Thomas Green, who hosted the event every year. By the time Clara arrived at 6 in the evening, the barn had been transformed with bunting and lanterns, the floor swept clean and sprinkled with cornmeal to make it smooth for dancing. Tables lined one wall, already laden with food that the women of the town had prepared, and at the far end, a group of musicians was tuning their instruments. Clara stood in the doorway in her blue dress and felt suddenly shy. She knew people now after 2 months in Wilson, but she was still an outsider, still the girl who had arrived with nothing. But then Mrs. Chen saw her and waved her over, and soon she was surrounded by friendly faces and welcoming smiles. The music started just as the sun was setting, and couples began to move onto the dance floor. Clara stood with a group of unmarried women, watching and tapping her foot to the rhythm. She looked around for Isaac, but did not see him, and a small kernel of disappointment settled in her stomach. Perhaps he had changed his mind. Perhaps he had only been being polite when he asked for a dance. But then the barn door opened, and there he was, freshly shaved and wearing clean clothes, his dark hair still damp, like he had dunked his whole head in a water trough. He scanned the crowd, and when his eyes found her, his whole face lit up in a way that made her breath catch. He crossed the barn in long strides and stopped in front of her, and Clara thought she had never seen anything as handsome as Isaac Lawson in that moment. "Miss Owens," he said, and his voice was warm. "You look beautiful." "Thank you, Mr. Lawson," Clara said, and she knew she was blushing, but she did not care. "You look very handsome yourself." "Would you do me the honor of this dance?" he asked, extending his hand. Clara placed her hand in his and let him lead her onto the dance floor. The musicians were playing a waltz, and when Isaac placed his hand at her waist and took her other hand in his, Clara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "I have been looking forward to this," Isaac said as they began to move, and he was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her with confidence. "As have I," Clara admitted. "I was worried you might not come." "I would not miss this for anything," Isaac said, and the intensity in his eyes when he said it made Clara's heart race. They danced 3 dances in a row, and Clara was vaguely aware of people watching them, whispering behind their hands. But she did not care. All that mattered was the feel of Isaac's hand on her waist, the way he looked at her like she was something precious, the sound of his laughter when she made a joke about Mr. Peterson's terrible cooking. When the musicians took a break, Isaac brought her a cup of punch, and they stood together on the edge of the crowd. Clara was acutely aware of how close he was standing, how his arm occasionally brushed against hers, how every accidental touch sent sparks through her nervous system. "Miss Owens," Isaac said, and then he paused. "May I call you Clara? It seems silly to be so formal when I have been thinking of you by your first name for weeks now." "Only if I may call you Isaac," Clara said, smiling up at him. "I would like that very much," Isaac said. "Clara." The way he said her name, soft and careful, like it was something valuable, made her feel warm all over. "Isaac," she said, testing it out. "Yes, I think we should dispense with formalities." They talked for the rest of the evening, dancing occasionally, but mostly just standing together and sharing conversation. Isaac told her about his ranch, describing the house he had built with his own hands, the cattle he was raising, his plans for the future. Clara told him about her dreams, modest as they were, to perhaps one day own her own business, to never have to worry about money again, to help Molly and her children escape their situation. "You have a good heart," Isaac said at one point, and the admiration in his voice was unmistakable. "Your sister is lucky to have you looking out for her." "Family takes care of family," Clara said simply. "It is what we do." As the evening drew to a close and people began to leave, Isaac walked Clara back toward the boarding house, maintaining a respectful distance but staying close enough that she could feel his presence like a physical thing. "I enjoyed tonight very much," Isaac said when they reached the steps leading up to her room. "Thank you for the dances." "Thank you for asking me," Clara said. "I had a wonderful time." They stood there for a moment, neither wanting to say goodbye, and Clara could feel the tension building between them, like a thunderstorm gathering on the horizon. "Clara," Isaac said, and his voice was rough. "May I call on you? Properly, I mean. I would like to court you if you would allow it." Clara's heart soared. "I would like that very much, Isaac." He reached out and took her hand, raising it to his lips and pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles that sent heat racing through her entire body. "Then I will see you Thursday, and perhaps Sunday after church as well." "I will look forward to it," Clara said breathlessly. She watched him walk away into the darkness, and then she climbed the stairs to her room and collapsed on the bed, pressing her hands to her cheeks and trying to process everything that had happened. Isaac Lawson wanted to court her. The man who had bought her fabric and told her she deserved nice things always wanted to court her. She barely slept that night, her mind replaying every moment of the evening, every word exchanged, every look shared. When she finally did drift off, she dreamed of blue eyes and calloused hands and a voice that said her name like a prayer. True to his word, Isaac came to church on Sunday and sat with her, his presence causing a stir among the congregation, who were not used to seeing the taciturn rancher at services. After the sermon, he walked with her back to the store, carrying the basket that held Mr. Peterson's lunch fixings, and they talked about everything and nothing until Mr. Peterson called her inside for the midday meal. "You are welcome to join us," Clara said, hoping he would say yes. "I would not want to intrude," Isaac said, but she could see the hope in his eyes. "It is no intrusion," Mr. Peterson called from inside. "Come in, Isaac. I made plenty." So Isaac joined them for lunch, and the three of them sat around the small table in the kitchen and ate Mr. Peterson's admittedly terrible stew while talking about the social and the weather and the price of beef. It felt domestic and comfortable, and Clara caught Isaac looking at her several times with an expression that made her stomach flutter. After lunch, Isaac helped Mr. Peterson move some heavy barrels in the store, and then he reluctantly said goodbye, reminding Clara that he would see her on Thursday. The courtship progressed slowly and sweetly over the following weeks. Isaac came to town twice a week now, on Thursdays for supplies and on Sundays for church, and he always spent as much time as he could with Clara. They took walks around Wilson, talked for hours on the bench outside the store, shared meals with Mr. Peterson, who served as an unofficial chaperone. Isaac told her about his ranch with increasing enthusiasm, describing the land and the cattle and the house in such detail that Clara felt like she could picture it perfectly. "I would like to show it to you," Isaac said one Thursday in late October, as they sat on the bench watching the sun set. "Would Mr. Peterson give you a day off? You could come out to the ranch and see what I have built." Clara's heart leaped at the idea. "I will ask him. I am sure he would allow it, especially if we brought him along as a chaperone." But when she asked Mr. Peterson, he waved away her concerns about propriety. "You are both adults, and Isaac is as honorable as they come. Go see his ranch, Clara. I can manage the store for one day. So, the following Saturday, Isaac arrived in Wilson driving a small wagon, and Clara climbed up beside him with a basket of food she had prepared for the journey. It was a beautiful autumn morning, cool and crisp, and as they drove out of town, Clara felt a sense of freedom she had not experienced in years. The ranch was 15 miles north, and Isaac used the time to point out landmarks and tell her stories about the area. He showed her where he had first camped when he arrived in Kansas, where he had fought off a pack of wolves that had been after his cattle, where he had found Thunder caught in a ravine with a broken leg and had spent 2 days nursing the horse back to health. When they crested a low hill and the ranch came into view, Clara gasped. It was beautiful in a stark, practical way. The house was small but sturdy, built of wood with a stone chimney. There was a barn that looked new, several corrals, and beyond that, the prairie stretched out in endless waves of golden grass. Cattle dotted the landscape, and in the distance she could see the glint of a creek. "This is yours?" Clara asked, awe in her voice. "You built all this?" "With my own 2 hands," Isaac said, and she could hear the pride in his voice. "It is not much yet, but it is mine. No bank owns it, no landlord can take it away. It is mine, free and clear." He helped her down from the wagon and showed her around, introducing her to Thunder, who snorted and stamped, but accepted her offered apple with good grace. He showed her the barn with its neat rows of stalls, the chicken coop where a dozen hens scratched in the dirt, the vegetable garden that was putting out its last produce before the frost came. And then he showed her the house, opening the door and standing back to let her enter first. It was one large room, with a sleeping area at one end and a kitchen at the other, with a fireplace dominating the wall between them. The furniture was handmade but well crafted. The floor was swept clean, and everything had a place. It was sparse but homey, and Clara could imagine what it could become with a woman's touch. "It is wonderful, Isaac," Clara said, turning to him with shining eyes. "You should be so proud of what you have accomplished." "I am," Isaac said, and then he took a deep breath. "Clara, I want to be honest with you about my intentions. I am courting you because I want to marry you. I know we have only known each other a few months, and I know this is fast, but I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. You are intelligent and kind and strong, and I want to build a life with you here on this ranch. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want to have children with you and grow old with you and make this place into a real home. But I will not rush you. I will wait as long as you need to be sure." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes because this man, this good and decent man, was offering her everything she had ever wanted. Not wealth or luxury, but a home and a partner and a future built on solid ground. "Isaac," she said, her voice shaking, "I do not need more time. I have been sure since the day you gave me that fabric and told me I deserved nice things. I have been sure since you asked me to dance at the social. I have been sure every Thursday when you walk through the door of the store, and my whole day gets brighter. Yes, I will marry you. Yes, I want to build a life with you here. Yes to all of it." The smile that broke across Isaac's face was like the sun coming out from behind clouds. He crossed the room in 2 strides and took her face in his hands, looking down at her with such tenderness that Clara felt her heart might burst. "May I kiss you?" he asked, and Clara nodded, unable to speak. His lips met hers softly, carefully, like she was something that might break. But when she wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him back, the kiss deepened, becoming something that spoke of passion and promise, and everything they would build together. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Clara Owens. I think I have loved you since the first moment I saw you in that threadbare dress, trying so hard to be dignified and brave." "I love you too, Isaac Lawson," Clara said, and she had never meant anything more in her life. "When should we get married?" "As soon as possible," Isaac said, "unless you want a big wedding with all the trimmings." Clara laughed. "I want to marry you and start our life together. I do not need anything fancy, just you and me and a preacher." They set the date for 3 weeks later, the second Saturday in November, which would give Clara time to finish out her employment with Mr. Peterson and give Isaac time to make the house ready for a wife. They told Mr. Peterson when they returned to Wilson that evening, and the old man's eyes filled with tears. "I am so happy for you both," he said, embracing Clara like the daughter he had lost. "Isaac, you are getting a treasure. Clara, "You are getting a good man. I could not ask for better." The next 3 weeks were a flurry of activity. Clara sewed new linens for the house, made curtains for the windows, packed her few belongings into the trunk that had been her mother's. The women of Wilson threw her a small party, gifting her with practical items like dishes and cooking pots and a beautiful quilt that Mrs. Chen had made. Clara was overwhelmed by the generosity and by how quickly she had been accepted into this community. Isaac came to town even more frequently now, always finding excuses to stop by the store and steal a few moments with his bride-to-be. They made plans for the ranch, for the life they would build together. Isaac wanted to expand the herd, maybe get some pigs, definitely plant a bigger garden in the spring. Clara wanted to learn to ride a horse, to help with the ranch work, to maybe take in sewing to bring in extra money. "You will not need to work," Isaac said when she mentioned the sewing. "I can provide for us." "I know you can," Clara said, "but I want to contribute. I want this to be ours together, not just yours with me as a passenger." The look Isaac gave her then was full of respect and love. Partners then, in everything. Partners, Clara agreed. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather, a clear November sky, and temperatures that were cool but not cold. They were married in the small church with half the town in attendance, and Clara wore her blue dress while Isaac wore a new suit he had purchased specially for the occasion. Mr. Peterson walked Clara down the aisle and gave her away with tears streaming down his face, and when the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, and Isaac kissed her, Clara felt like her life was finally, truly beginning. The wedding celebration was held at the church with food and dancing and good wishes from everyone. Clara danced with Isaac and with Mr. Peterson and with several of the other men from town, but she kept coming back to her husband, drawn to him like a compass needle to north. As the sun began to set, Isaac and Clara climbed into the wagon and headed north toward the ranch, toward their home. Clara leaned against Isaac's shoulder, her hand tucked into his, and watched the prairie roll by in shades of gold and amber. "Happy?" Isaac asked, glancing down at her. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Clara said honestly. "Thank you, Isaac, for the fabric and the dress and the proposal, but mostly for seeing me when everyone else looked past me. Thank you for thinking I deserved nice things." "You deserve everything good this world has to offer," Isaac said fiercely. "And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you have it." When they arrived at the ranch, Isaac carried Clara over the threshold, both of them laughing at the absurdity and the romance of the gesture. He set her down in the middle of the room, and Clara looked around at what was now her home. Isaac had been busy in the past weeks, adding touches that he knew she would like. There were wildflowers in a jar on the table, new curtains on the windows that he had clearly sewn himself with uneven stitches, a rocking chair by the fireplace that he had made from scratch. "Isaac," Clara breathed, turning to him with wonder. "It is perfect." "You are perfect," Isaac said, pulling her close. "I love you, Mrs. Lawson." "I love you too, Mr. Lawson," Clara said. And then he was kissing her again, and the rest of the world faded away until there was nothing but the two of them and the life they were beginning together. That night, wrapped in Isaac's arms in their bed, Clara thought about the journey that had brought her here. From St. Louis, with nothing but a threadbare dress and $3, through the dust and uncertainty of arriving in a strange town, to this moment of perfect contentment. She thought about how close she had come to giving up, to accepting that this was all life would offer her. And then she thought about Isaac walking into the store with that parcel of fabric and changing everything. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac murmured against her hair. "About how lucky I am," Clara said. "About how one act of kindness changed my entire life." "I am the lucky one," Isaac said. "You could have any man you wanted, Clara. I still cannot believe you chose me." Clara turned in his arms so she could look at him in the moonlight streaming through the window. "I chose you because you saw me as I was and thought I deserved better. You gave me dignity when the world had stripped me of it. You made me believe I was worth something. How could I not choose you?" Isaac kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I will spend every day of our lives together making sure you never doubt your worth again." And he did. The days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and Isaac kept his promise. He treated Clara like she was precious, like her thoughts and opinions mattered, like she was an equal partner in everything they built together. They worked side by side on the ranch, Clara learning to ride and rope and help with the cattle. She proved to be a natural horsewoman, and Isaac bought her a mare named Daisy, who was gentle but fast. The winter was hard, as all Kansas winters were, but they weathered it together. They spent long evenings by the fire, Clara sewing while Isaac carved wooden toys that he planned to give to the children in town. They read to each other from the few books they owned, played cards, made love, and talked about their dreams for the future. When spring came, they planted the large garden Clara had wanted, putting in vegetables and herbs, and even some flowers just for beauty. Clara started taking in sewing from the women in town, and the extra money helped them buy more cattle. The herd grew, and with it their prosperity. In May, Clara realized she was pregnant. She told Isaac one morning over breakfast, simply stating the fact and watching his face transform with joy. He picked her up and spun her around the kitchen, laughing and crying at the same time. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby." "Are you happy?" Clara asked, though she could see the answer written all over his face. "Happy does not even begin to cover it," Isaac said, setting her down carefully like she was made of glass. "You have given me everything, Clara, a home, a purpose, and now a child. How did I get so lucky?" The pregnancy progressed smoothly, and Clara continued to work on the ranch until Isaac finally put his foot down in her 7th month and insisted she take it easier. She chafed at the restriction but knew he was right, so she focused on preparing for the baby, sewing tiny clothes and knitting blankets and organizing the corner of the room where they would put the cradle Isaac was building. In January of 1881, on a snowy evening with the wind howling outside, Clara went into labor. Isaac rode like a demon to fetch Mrs. Chen, who served as the town midwife, and the two of them helped Clara through the long hours of labor. Isaac held her hand and wiped her brow and told her she was strong and brave and doing beautifully. And when the baby finally arrived just after dawn, Isaac was there to catch his son. "A boy," Mrs. Chen announced, placing the squalling infant in Clara's arms. "A healthy, strong boy." Clara looked down at her son, at his red face and dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air, and felt a love so overwhelming it threatened to consume her. Isaac sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, and they both stared at the miracle they had created. "What should we name him?" Clara asked. "I was thinking James," Isaac said, "after my father." "James Lawson," Clara said, testing it out. "I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, little one." Motherhood transformed Clara in ways she had not anticipated. She had always been strong and capable, but now she discovered reserves of patience and tenderness she had not known she possessed. James was an easy baby, quick to smile and slow to cry, and Isaac was a devoted father, changing diapers and walking the floor with the baby when he was fussy and singing terrible off-key lullabies that somehow always worked. The ranch continued to prosper. By the time James was a year old, they had 500 head of cattle and had hired a hand named Daniel to help with the work. Clara went back to her sewing business, working during James's naps, and the extra income allowed them to add a second room to the house. They were not wealthy, but they were comfortable, and more importantly, they were happy. When James was 2, Clara became pregnant again. This time she knew what to expect, and while the pregnancy was harder than the first, she handled it with the same determination she brought to everything else. In the summer of 1883, she gave birth to a daughter they named Alice, who had Clara's gray eyes and Isaac's dark hair. "Now we have one of each," Isaac said, holding his daughter and looking at her with such love that Clara felt her own eyes tear up. "Our family is complete." "Unless you want more?" Clara asked, because they had never discussed how many children they wanted. Isaac looked at her seriously. "I want whatever you want. If you want 10 children, we will have 10 children. If you want to stop at 2, then 2 is perfect. You are the one who does the hard work of growing them and birthing them, so you get to decide." "I think 2 is good," Clara said, smiling, "though I reserve the right to change my mind in a few years." Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. James and Alice grew, the ranch prospered, and Clara and Isaac fell deeper in love with each passing year. They faced challenges, of course. There was the year the drought nearly wiped out their herd, the winter when a blizzard killed half their cattle, the time James broke his arm falling out of a tree, and Clara nearly wore a hole in the floor, pacing while they waited for the doctor. But they faced everything together, partners in the truest sense of the word. Clara stayed in touch with her sister Molly, sending money when she could, and eventually convincing Molly to leave her worthless husband and move to Kansas with her children. Isaac helped Molly find a small house in Wilson and helped her get a job at the general store, which Mr. Peterson still ran with the help of a young clerk. Molly's children thrived in the open spaces of Kansas, and Molly herself seemed to bloom away from the oppression of her marriage. "You saved me," Molly told Clara one day when they were visiting, "just like that cowboy of yours saved you." "We saved each other," Clara corrected, because that was the truth. Isaac had given her material comfort, yes, but more than that, he had given her dignity and respect and love, and she had given him the same, transforming his empty house into a home, his solitary existence into a family. The years passed with the kind of speed that only happens when you are happy. James grew into a tall, serious boy who loved the ranch and wanted nothing more than to follow in his father's footsteps. Alice was bright and funny and fearless, insisting on learning to ride almost before she could walk and tagging after her father and brother constantly. Clara watched her children grow and felt blessed beyond measure. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Isaac took Clara on a picnic to the spot where he had first camped when he came to Kansas. They left the children with Molly for the day and rode out together, just the two of them, and spread a blanket on the prairie grass under the endless sky. "Do you remember the first time I saw you?" Isaac asked, lying back with his hands behind his head. "Of course," Clara said, settling beside him. "You came into the store and looked at me like I was a puzzle you needed to solve. You were wearing that terrible dress," Isaac said, and there was no meanness in his voice, just remembering. "And you were trying so hard to look dignified despite it. I thought you were the bravest person I had ever seen." "I thought you were going to tell Mr. Peterson to fire me," Clara admitted. "You looked so stern." "I was angry," Isaac said. "Angry that someone like you was reduced to wearing rags. Angry that the world had treated you poorly. Angry that I could see how smart and capable you were, but you were stuck behind a counter because you did not have the resources to be anything else." "And so you bought me fabric," Clara said softly. "You gave me the means to change my circumstances." "I gave you fabric," Isaac corrected. "You did everything else. You sewed the dresses, you built the relationships with the townspeople, you made a place for yourself here. All I did was provide the material." Clara rolled over so she was looking down at him. "You did so much more than that. You saw me, Isaac, really saw me. Not just what I lacked, but what I had to offer. You made me believe I deserved good things. You changed my entire life with one act of kindness." Isaac reached up and cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. "I love you, Clara, more now than the day I married you, which I would not have thought possible." "I love you too," Clara said. "Thank you for building this life with me. Thank you for being my partner in everything. Thank you for keeping your promise." "What promise?" Isaac asked, though she could see in his eyes that he knew. "That I deserve nice things always," Clara said. "You have given me a beautiful life, Isaac Lawson. I could not ask for anything more." "And you have given me the same," Isaac said, pulling her down for a kiss. "Here is to the next 10 years, and the 10 after that, and all the years to come." They spent the afternoon on the prairie, talking and laughing and making plans for the future. When they returned home as the sun was setting, James and Alice ran out to meet them, full of stories about their day with Aunt Molly. Clara looked at her family, at Isaac swinging Alice up onto his shoulders while James chattered about a bird's nest he had found, and felt a contentment so profound it brought tears to her eyes. This was what she had dreamed of in those desperate days in St. Louis, though she had not dared to believe it could be real. A home, a family, a partner who loved and respected her. Security and purpose and joy. All because a cowboy had walked into a store, seen a woman in a threadbare dress, and decided she deserved better. The children grew, and the years passed. James turned 18 and took over more of the ranch work, proving himself to be as capable as his father. Alice surprised everyone by showing an aptitude for numbers and convinced Isaac to let her handle the ranch accounts, which she managed with impressive skill. Clara's sewing business had grown to the point where she employed 2 other women from town, and the extra income allowed them to buy more land and expand the ranch further. Mr. Peterson passed away peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, leaving the store to Clara in his will, along with a letter that made her cry for an hour. He wrote that she had been like a daughter to him, that watching her transform from a scared girl in a threadbare dress to a confident, successful woman had been one of the great joys of his life. Clara kept the letter in her trunk, tucked beside the scraps of blue fabric from her wedding dress that she had saved. Molly remarried, this time to a kind farmer, who treated her well and loved her children as his own. She bloomed in her new marriage, and Clara was grateful to see her sister finally happy. As Clara entered her 40s, she sometimes took out the old dress, the one that had been falling apart when she arrived in Wilson. She had kept it, though she was not entirely sure why. Perhaps as a reminder of where she had come from, of how far she had traveled. She would hold the threadbare fabric in her hands and remember that scared 22-year-old girl who had stepped off the stagecoach with $3 and a prayer. "Why do you keep that old thing?" Isaac asked one day, finding her with the dress spread across her lap. "Because it reminds me," Clara said simply. "It reminds me that circumstances do not define us, that one act of kindness can change everything, that we all deserve nice things, always, no matter where we started." Isaac sat beside her and took her hand. "I am glad I bought you that fabric." "So am I," Clara said, "though I think I would have fallen in love with you anyway, even without the new dresses." "Would you?" Isaac asked, genuinely curious. "Yes," Clara said with certainty. "Because you are a good man, Isaac Lawson, the best man I have ever known. The fabric was just the beginning. You proved your character every day after that, in 1,000 small ways. That is what I fell in love with." Years continued to roll by, like the prairie grass in the wind. James married a girl from town named Sarah, and they built a house on the far end of the ranch property. Alice shocked everyone by deciding she wanted to go to college, and after much discussion, Isaac and Clara sent her to a women's college in Missouri where she studied business. She came home for summers and holidays, full of ideas and enthusiasm, and eventually joined the ranch operations as a full partner, modernizing their practices and increasing their profits considerably. Clara and Isaac became grandparents when James and Sarah had a son. They named Isaac after his grandfather. More grandchildren followed, and Clara found that being a grandmother was even more joyful than being a mother because she got all the love with less of the worry. They celebrated their 25th anniversary, then their 30th. Isaac's hair went gray, and lines appeared around Clara's eyes from years of smiling. They moved a bit slower, took more time to rest, but their love never diminished. If anything, it deepened, maturing like good wine into something rich and sustaining. On a warm evening in the spring of 1904, Clara and Isaac sat together on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. They were both in their 60s now, their children grown and successful, their grandchildren healthy and happy. The ranch had prospered beyond their wildest dreams, providing not just for them, but for James and his family as well. "Do you ever regret it?" Clara asked suddenly. "Marrying a girl in a threadbare dress who had nothing to offer but stubbornness and hope?" Isaac turned to her with surprise. "Regret it? Clara, marrying you was the best decision I ever made. You brought joy and purpose to my life. You gave me children and grandchildren. You helped me build this ranch into something meaningful. How could I possibly regret any of that?" "I just wonder sometimes," Clara said. "You could have married any woman, someone with money or connections or education." "I did not want any woman," Isaac said firmly. "I wanted you. I wanted the brave girl who got off that stagecoach with nothing and refused to be defeated. I wanted the woman who worked harder than anyone I had ever met. I wanted the partner who stood beside me through droughts and blizzards and hard years. I wanted you, Clara, exactly as you were and exactly as you are." Clara leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling tears prick at her eyes. "You always know exactly what to say." "I just tell the truth," Isaac said, wrapping his arm around her. "I love you, Clara Lawson. I have loved you for 25 years, and I will love you for however many years we have left." "I love you too," Clara said. "Thank you for seeing me all those years ago. Thank you for the fabric and the kindness and the life we built together. Thank you for making me believe I deserve nice things always." "You do deserve nice things always," Isaac said, "and I am honored that I got to be one of those nice things in your life." They sat together as the sun dipped below the horizon, wrapped in each other's arms and in the memories of a life well lived. The prairie wind whispered through the grass, carrying with it the sounds of cattle lowing and children laughing and all the small sounds that made up their world. Inside the house, the blue dress hung in the wardrobe, carefully preserved and occasionally brought out for special occasions. It was faded now, the fabric worn soft with age, but it still held its shape and its beauty. Just like the love between the cowboy and the girl in the threadbare dress, it had endured through time and hardship and emerged stronger for it. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Clara thought about everything that had led to this moment. The poverty and struggle of her early life, the desperate journey to Kansas, the humiliation of wearing a dress that was falling apart, the unexpected kindness of a stranger who saw her worth when no one else did. Every moment, good and bad, had brought her here, to this porch and this man and this beautiful life they had created together. "What are you thinking about?" Isaac asked, his voice quiet in the darkness. "About how one decision can change everything," Clara said. "If I had not taken that job in Wilson, if you had not walked into the store that day, if you had not bought me that fabric, where would we be now?" "I like to think we would have found each other anyway," Isaac said. "Some things are just meant to be." "Do you really believe that?" Clara asked. "I do," Isaac said with conviction. "I think you and I were always headed toward each other. The dress was just the catalyst. Something else would have brought us together, if not that." Clara smiled in the darkness. "I like that idea, that we were fated to find each other." "Not fated," Isaac corrected. "Blessed. We were blessed to find each other." They stayed on the porch until the stars filled the entire sky, until the moon rose over the prairie and bathed everything in silver light. Then they went inside together, hand in hand, and prepared for bed just as they had done every night for 25 years. As Clara lay in Isaac's arms, listening to his breathing slow and deepen into sleep, she thought about the girl she had been and the woman she had become. She thought about threadbare dresses and acts of kindness and love that endured. She thought about cowboys who kept their promises and lives that exceeded every hope and dream. And she thought about how sometimes, just sometimes, the world gave you exactly what you needed exactly when you needed it. A new dress to replace the one that was falling apart. A kind word to restore shattered dignity. A love that would last a lifetime and beyond. "You deserve nice things always," Isaac had said all those years ago, and he had spent every day since proving it to be true. He had given her more than fabric, more than a new dress. He had given her respect and partnership and unwavering love. He had given her a home and a family and a future filled with possibility, and in return, she had given him the same. Two people who had found each other against the odds, who had built something beautiful out of nothing, who had loved each other through good times and bad, through years of plenty and years of hardship. The years continued to pass, as years always do. Isaac and Clara grew older, but their love never aged, remaining fresh and vibrant and sustaining. They watched their grandchildren grow and welcomed great-grandchildren. They saw the 20th century arrive with all its changes and innovations. The railroad finally came through Wilson, just as Mr. Peterson had predicted all those years ago, transforming the town from a dusty outpost into a thriving community. Alice never married, choosing instead to focus on the ranch and on her own business ventures. She opened a dress shop in Wilson that became famous throughout Kansas for the quality of its garments, and she always made sure to employ women who needed a chance, women like her mother had been. James expanded the ranch further, adding sheep to their cattle operation, and his children showed every sign of continuing the tradition. On their 40th anniversary, the entire family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. Children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren filled the house and spilled out onto the porch and into the yard. There was food and music and laughter, and as the sun set, Isaac stood and raised his glass. 40 years ago, I married the love of my life, he said, his voice strong despite his age. I married a woman who had nothing but the dress on her back, which was falling apart at the seams. But I saw past the threadbare fabric to the person underneath, and I saw strength and courage and beauty. Clara, you have given me the best years of my life. You have been my partner, my friend, my love. You have given me children and grandchildren and a legacy that will endure long after we are gone. I cannot imagine my life without you, and I thank God every day that you walked into that store in Wilson all those years ago. Clara stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, and looked out at her family. Isaac gave me a new dress, she said, her voice shaking with emotion. But more than that, he gave me a new life. He told me I deserved nice things always. And then he spent 40 years proving it. He gave me respect when the world offered none. He gave me partnership when I expected servitude. He gave me love that has sustained me through every challenge. My life began the day I met Isaac Lawson, and every day since has been a gift." The family cheered and raised their glasses, and Clara and Isaac kissed while their descendants applauded. It was a perfect moment, the culmination of 40 years of love and work and dedication. As the party continued around them, Clara pulled Isaac aside and led him to the barn where they could have a moment of privacy. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper, just like the one he had given her so long ago. "What is this?" Isaac asked, smiling at the familiar wrapping. "Open it," Clara said. He untied the string and pulled back the paper, and inside was a quilt made from scraps of all the dresses she had worn over their 40 years together. There was a square of blue from her wedding dress, brown from her everyday work dress, calico from the dress she had worn when James was born, green from the dress she had worn to Alice's graduation. Each square represented a memory, a moment in their shared life. "Clara!" Isaac breathed, running his hands over the quilt. "This is beautiful." "Every piece tells a story," Clara said. "Our story. I wanted you to have something that showed you how much these 40 years have meant to me. You gave me fabric for my first new dress, and now I am giving you fabric that represents our entire life together." Isaac pulled her close, holding her tight against his chest. "I love it. I love you. Thank you for 40 incredible years." "Thank you for making them incredible," Clara said. "I love you, Isaac. Always." They stood together in the barn, wrapped in each other's arms, while the sounds of their family celebrating drifted in from outside. Two people who had found each other when they both needed finding, who had built a life of meaning and purpose, who had loved each other through everything the world could throw at them. The threadbare dress was long gone now, deteriorated beyond saving, but its memory lived on. It represented not poverty or shame, but rather the starting point of a journey that had led to everything good in Clara's life. It represented the moment when a cowboy had looked at a girl in rags and seen not what she lacked, but what she offered. It represented the beginning of a love story that had endured for 40 years and showed no signs of ending. Isaac and Clara lived many more years together, growing old but never growing apart. They remained partners until the very end, facing each new day together with the same determination and love that had characterized their entire marriage. When Isaac finally passed away at the age of 82, he died peacefully in his sleep with Clara beside him, her hand in his just as it had been for over 50 years. Clara grieved deeply, as was right and natural, but she did not break. Isaac had made her too strong for that. She lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them stories about their grandfather, and about the day he had walked into a store and changed her life with a parcel of fabric. When it was finally her time to go, Clara died in the house Isaac had built, in the bed they had shared for so many years. Her last conscious thought was of a young cowboy with blue-gray eyes telling her she deserved nice things always, and her last feeling was one of profound gratitude for a life well lived and a love that had transcended everything. At her funeral, Alice stood before the assembled family and told the story that everyone knew, but never tired of hearing. The story of a girl in a threadbare dress and a cowboy who saw her worth. The story of kindness and dignity and love that endured. The story of how one simple act had changed 2 lives and created a legacy that would endure for generations. "My mother used to say that we all deserve nice things," Alice said, her voice breaking with emotion. "Not material wealth, necessarily, but respect and dignity and love. My father understood that, and he gave those things to my mother freely and without reservation. He saw her not as she appeared, but as she truly was, and he loved her for it. That is the lesson they taught us, and that is what we must remember. Every person we meet deserves to be seen for who they truly are, not just what circumstances have made them appear to be. That is what my parents gave each other, and that is what they gave to all of us." The family gathered afterward, sharing memories and stories, and someone brought out the quilt Clara had made, spreading it across a table so everyone could see it. They pointed to different squares, remembering the occasions when those dresses had been worn, the moments in Clara and Isaac's life that each piece of fabric represented. And there, carefully preserved in a special case, was a small square of green fabric, faded and worn almost to transparency. It was a piece of the original threadbare dress, saved by Clara all those years as a reminder of where she had started. It was placed in the center of the quilt, surrounded by all the beautiful fabrics that had come after, a testament to the journey from poverty to prosperity, from despair to hope, from loneliness to love. The legacy of Clara and Isaac Lawson lived on in their descendants, in the ranch they had built, in the town of Wilson that had become home, in the countless lives they had touched with their kindness and generosity. Their love story became part of the fabric of Kansas history, told and retold to children and grandchildren as an example of how love should be, how partnership should work, how one act of kindness could ripple out across generations. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the prairie wind whispered through the grass, people swore they could see two figures sitting on the porch of the old ranch house, hand in hand, watching the sunset together just as they had done for so many years. The cowboy and the girl in the threadbare dress, together for all eternity, proof that love, real love, never truly ends. It transforms and endures and becomes something greater than the sum of its parts. It becomes legend, yes, but more than that, it becomes hope. Hope that we can all find someone who sees our worth when the world does not. Hope that kindness still exists in a hard world. Hope that love, true and deep and abiding, is not just a fairy tale, but a reality waiting to be claimed by those brave enough to reach for it. Clara Owens and Isaac Lawson had reached for it, grabbed it with both hands, and held on through everything life threw at them. They had built a life of meaning and purpose out of nothing more than determination and love. They had proved that circumstances do not define us, that we all deserve nice things always, and that sometimes, just sometimes, the world gives us exactly what we need in the form of a kind word, a generous gesture, or a parcel of fabric wrapped in brown paper. Their story ended, as all stories must, but its impact continued on, touching lives and changing hearts long after they were gone. And that, perhaps, is the greatest legacy anyone can leave behind. Not wealth or fame or power, but love that endures and kindness that ripples outward, touching lives in ways we can never fully comprehend. The cowboy and the girl in the threadbare dress had left the world better than they found it, had loved each other completely and without reservation, and had proved that sometimes the best love stories are not the ones that happen to other people, but the ones we write ourselves, one kind gesture at a time.